I believe that you maybe know what PEFA is a public expenditure and financial accountability program. That's what PEFA means. And we had more than 600 evaluation in various countries, and it is a program which is supported by 9 partners, 3 international, which is the EU, IMF, and the World Bank, and also 6 governments, which is the UK, France, Norway, and Switzerland. And 154 countries, lots of countries from sub-Saharan Africa that benefited from this program. And the novelty since 2 years is that the PEFA program works to create an impact on PMF regarding on long-term and durability, and to integrate gender. And since last year, we worked also on the impact of climate on public finances, and also taking in consideration of public finance regarding climate change. In coordination with new actors, with our classical traditional partners, I would say, but also we work with UNDP and UNF, and as think tanks, various think tanks. Well, I would say that we have a very large coordination with many role players, so that we can understand how to better integrate climate change in finance, public finance. And this model, we tested it, and we continue testing it, and it was tested in Samoa first, and this is why my colleagues will explain the approach in a few moments. And in conclusion, I would say that we continue testing it. So our next model will be in Africa, and our evaluation should be taking place with in partnership with FCTO and others. So thank you very much, and I'm going to give the floor to Figa.
So Samoa, along with other Pacific Island nations, are amongst the most vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters. I saw some presentation earlier, and it seems like all of the small island states are very vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters. And in the past 12 years, Samoa had not only been affected by a catastrophic tsunami, but there were also some devastating cyclones, and then the recent flooding that just severely affected us in December following the tragic measles epidemic in 2019, and now the global COVID-19 disease. This tragedies not only claimed lives, but it heavily impacted on the livelihoods of our people, as well as the economic developments of our small island nation. For instance, the cost of Cyclone Evan in 2012 was equivalent to 30% of GDP, Samoa's GDP. And the recent flooding that only lasted 4 hours and affected the central town area of Opia was estimated to cost 71 million Samoan sala. Now, the government recognized the huge impacts of climate change and natural disasters to our economy, and therefore moved towards mainstreaming climate risk and resilience across its 14 main sectors through the Strategy for the Development of Samoa, or our SDS. The SDS outlines the government priorities for development in the next 5 years, and one of its key outcomes was climate change and disaster resilience. We also note that climate change has added fiscal pressure on the government, and as such, maintaining fiscal sustainability through improving revenue collection and compliance, combined with spending restraints, continues to be a key priority, while at the same time, government will continue to boost resilience to the effects of climate change and natural disasters, as well as continuous reforms to manage public funds and strengthen PFM systems. Development, coordination, and implementation of climate change policy is managed primarily through the Ministry of Finance, which has responsibility for overall coordination of climate resilience investment program and ensuring financing is available. The Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, or MNRE, is the technical agency for climate change and disaster risk management. Now, there are some of our state-owned enterprises as well that have leading agencies in implementing some of our climate change initiatives or projects. And this includes the Electric Power Corporation, which implements some of our energy sector projects that contributes to addressing climate change, as well as the Land Transport Authority, which is another major SOE that leads the infrastructure projects in ensuring that our roads are built in international standards and are climate proof and resilient. So also acknowledging the assistance provided by our development partners, bilateral and multilateral. In Samoa, majority of our major climate related projects are funded through development partner funding. That includes ADB, World Bank, UN, GCF, CHIF, and etc. So shared on the screen is a list of some of Samoa's climate change policies. These policies and plans assist Samoa in addressing climate change impacts and achieving our NDC targets. Now, having these policies in place and with good planning will ensure quicker recovery and a more immediate response to climate change and natural disasters. Infrastructure work has been planned through the sector roads and Maisingana River updates are the key climate change adaptation efforts under the Green Climate Fund. Now with the PEFA climate change, like all other projects, there will always be some challenges. And with the assessment or the PEFA climate change assessment, it being a fairly new process and it was done virtually was a challenge, seeing that this assessment is evidence-based. Secondly, is the coordination and collating of the information needed by the assessors to help them with the scoring of each dimensions in the assessment. So because climate change is an issue, is a cross-cutting issue, most of the information that were needed were quite scattered around in most of our ministries and our SOEs, as mentioned in my slides earlier. So it was the coordination and the collation that was kind of a challenge for us in ensuring that we have those evidence for the assessors. Even though we had some challenges, most of the opportunities we had and are listed here, we've listed 5. So first is the assessment has given us a sense of where we can adequately reflect climate change issues in the budget formulating process and the policy coordination space. So there is no doubt the government is committed to addressing climate change issues with the view to mitigating its adverse impact on infrastructure, buildings, and the community in general. So therefore, we believe that climate change should be considered in the budget circular, the resource allocation, and consultations with stakeholders. Secondly, the assessment provides opportunities for scaled up resource allocation towards climate change, as well as designing appropriate policies to tax GHG and streamline tax measures in favor of climate change. So for government to amp up its mitigation and adaptation initiatives, tax policies to specifically target GHG emitters and other environmental polluters is warranted. This will not only help raise government revenues, but it will also contribute greatly to achieving our NDC targets better, and therefore improve coherence and consistency in the climate change space. Firstly, I strongly believe the assessment will greatly facilitate our efforts to gain direct access GCF funding and become a national implementing agency. Access to GCF facility is constrained by our inability to meet GCF requirements, which to a large extent are public finance related. So this PEFA climate change combines BFM and climate change considerations and should therefore complement our efforts to access the GCF funds. Lastly, the assessments was evidence-based, similarly to any other PEFA assessment, so the information required were scattered among ministries and SOEs, and this was the issue that I mentioned in one of our challenges. So furthermore, we realized that some of the policy needs to be updated to reflect the current situations that we are in today. So the experiences from the PEFA climate change complements government efforts to update and also to try and collate the information needed. And it was also a good timing because our government is planning to establish a Ministry of Climate Change. So the lessons learned and experiences from this PEFA climate change will help facilitate some of the policies that we will put in place for this ministry to be established. And so without taking away the important roles of SOEs and ministries, this will also help better our resolution to being climate change resilience. Thank you so much.
The primary purpose of what this PEFA climate is supposed to measure is to what extent the Samoan government systems are contributing towards it achieving those objectives. It's not there to say, oh, you've got a good climate change policy or you've got a bad climate change policy. We accept at face value and with goodwill what the climate change policies are, what the strategies are, and then we look at the government's public finance management systems to see if they are supportive of the government in terms of reaching that goal. And quite in a very frank and blunt way, the way I describe it is the government serious about climate change? If it is, then their PFM systems and processes would reflect that. So what you'll see there on the right-hand side of the slide are the different parts of the PFM cycle. The budget formulation, budget execution, accounting and reporting, external scrutiny and audit. So we formulate a budget, we then, that goes to Parliament, as we all know, then we execute it, we spend the money, we do what needs to be done, implementing it, we account for the money we spend, we report on it, and then we put it to external scrutiny and audit so that other stakeholders can be assured that originally what the money was intended for was what it was actually spent on. So in the PEFA, we have indicators and dimensions. Indicators are broader sort of coverage like procurement and public investment, and then they're broken down into different dimensions. So for budget formulation, we look at, is the budget aligned with climate change strategies? If I read the budget, does it actually mirror what's been said in those climate change policies? Is climate-related expenditure tracked and monitored? What's in the budget circular? Does the budget circular have any guidance on climate change? In the scrutiny of the budget by the Parliament, do they ask questions about climate change? In terms of public investment, there are always rules in lots of countries about what the rules are around public investment. What have they got about climate-related provisions? And when projects are selected and appraised, are they selected and appraised on their climate responsiveness? Budget execution. So we execute the budget. That means we purchase goods and services, we build things, we need to pay for those. So in terms of procurement, how does that work in terms of executing the budget? Is there a system of controls which are effective? Controls are about ensuring that when someone goes to the Ministry of Finance and wants a payment for a service or a good, that there's a control mechanism within the Ministry of Finance that says, okay, yes, there was money appropriated for that particular thing or event or activity, and the money is there and it's been sourced properly and there's an effective set of controls and the overall compliance of those transactions. So that's what we look at when we're looking at budget execution. Accounting and reporting, of course, lots of stakeholders want to ensure that they get information. So there's one thing about, of course, having the data there. That's one aspect of reporting. The second aspect of reporting is actually getting that information together in a sense that's relevant and that people can understand. And the third, of course, is publishing material in a timely manner. If you have a report, a financial report that's for the end of March 2021, there's no point in publishing that report in June 2022. The time is gone. It means nothing. So this is really about the timeliness and accuracy of this reporting. So you can see there, climate-related information in performance plans and reports, evaluations of expenditure and taxes, and we'll talk a little bit about those. Outturns just means the money that's been spent. So can we see how much money has been spent on climate change? Managing your assets, are you climate responsive in terms of your roads, your bridges, your schools, things that are assets that are non-financial? And do you outline in your fiscal statements what the climate related risks are? I mean, it's one thing to say that we have climate events and there'll be an event happening, but do you put in what the probability of a cyclone will be over the next 3 to 5 years, and to what, if it's a cyclone of category 4, what sort of impact that'll have? And of course, debts and loans that are being taken out and guarantees that are provided to SOEs, in particular, public corporations that have to undertake climate related tasks. And then finally, we have our, the auditor mainly, and also the Parliament's processes around external scrutiny. Is there a good scrutiny of looking at examining what has been done in terms of climate related activities? And is there a reasonable scrutiny process that gets undertaken to assure stakeholders and the general community that there has been some money spent and implemented as was desired on, climate related activities?